Okay, thank you everyone for your patience. Welcome to today's HEIA webinar featuring Leila Fathi. I'm Peter Craig from HEIA ACT and I'll be hosting today's session. It's a pleasure to have you join us today, where we'll have an insightful session with Leila discussing her work in empowering primary students to embrace healthy eating. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet today. We would pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us. I'm coming from the lands of the Ngunnawal people here in Canberra, and Leila joins us from the lands of the Yuggera and the Turrbal peoples. As an introduction to Leila, Leila's an accredited practicing dietitian and she's a PhD candidate at the University of Queensland. Her research explores the long-term implementation and sustainability of school nutrition programs, including a Health and Wellbeing Queensland program called Pick of the Crop. Leila's areas of interest include implementation science, sustainable food systems, and health promotion. She has presented at both Australian and international conferences, and she's a recipient of the nationally recognised King and Amy O'Malley Trust Scholarship, and she's held that from 2022 to 24. As for some housekeeping, today's session is being recorded. Please type your questions in the chat function as they come to your mind. We will have time to answer those at the end. And I understand that Leila is going to she's got a question for you all. So we're hoping that you're able to answer that through the chat function, but Leila will introduce that throughout as it comes up in the session. So Leila, I hand over to you for you to start your presentation. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for having me today, and thank you for the warm introduction as well. As mentioned, I'm Leila. I am an accredited practicing dietitian and PhD candidate at the University of Queensland. And I wanted to really thank the team from the King and Amy O'Malley Trust for having me here today to present to you on some of the findings from my PhD research. One aspect of my PhD research actually was an evaluation of a Health and Wellbeing Queensland program called Pick of the Crop, which we'll dive into very soon. But essentially, it is entitled Empowering Primary School Students to Embrace Healthy Eating. This is the journey from what's this to I grew it. But before I get started, I would like to make a few acknowledgements, which I think are really important. The first is that I have numerous co-authors on this project here with me from various institutions, and this research would not have been possible if it wasn't for their valuable contributions. In terms of the funding for this project, the Pick of the Crop initiative was developed and is being delivered by Health and Wellbeing Queensland. Is being delivered by the Queensland government through Health and Wellbeing Queensland. This institution is Queensland's statutory body for implementing health promotion initiatives. The evaluation of Pick of the Crop was commissioned through Health and Wellbeing Queensland. I would also like to sincerely thank and acknowledge the King and Amy O'Malley Trust for their financial contribution towards my PhD. It was a significant help in really driving the research forwards, and I am incredibly thankful and grateful for their support. I too would also like to make an acknowledgement of country. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and their custodianship of the lands on which we meet. And so, as mentioned, from where I am, it is the Yuggera and Turrbal peoples. I pay my respects to their ancestors and their descendants who continue cultural and spiritual connections to country. And I truly recognize their valuable contributions to Australian and global society. So to get us started, I wanted to ask you a question. So from your experience working with children and students, what percentage of school-age children do you think meet the recommendations for both vegetables and fruit? And so on the screen, I have listed here what is a vegetable serve equivalent. So this is typically 1 cup of raw vegetables or half a cup of cooked vegetables. And as you can see here, most children should be aiming for around 5 serves of vegetables. And when it comes to fruit, we typically say to aim for 2 serves of vegetables. And 1 serve equates to 1 big fruit or 2 small ones. Now, I don't think I can see the chat right now. But I was wondering what the participants think and if there's any answers that are coming through.
There are. So we've got 0. I think less than 5, I should know. I know it's I think it's very low. Anyway, less than 5 is my guess. We've got 4 to 5%, another less than 5. We just wait a few moments to see if anyone else has got some comments. Okay, agree less than 5. Because it's both fruit and vegetable, which I think impacts it. Yeah.
So there seems to be
it seems quite low. Yeah.
And it's less than 5. Well, that's actually pretty spot on, and I'm very impressed by that you all guesstimated it, fairly correctly, but unfortunately, it's a really sad statistic. So only 4.3% of children actually meet the recommendations for both vegetables and fruit. And this was actually a decrease from the 2017-2018 period, which was at 6%. So we're not improving, we're not even plateauing, we're actually doing a bit worse. And it also was exacerbated after the COVID period. So it's interesting because we find that when it comes to fruit, children are actually quite receptive to eating fruit and they quite like it. So 63.9% of children actually do meet the recommendation for fruit. But when it comes to vegetables, it's drastically lower at only 4.6%. And that is why the statistic for both fruit and vegetable comes down significantly. And what we do know as well is that children who live in regional and remote areas of Australia have lower vegetable and fruit consumption compared to their metropolitan counterparts. So this is a real challenge that we're observing across Australia. So in essence, what the statistics are telling us is that school students as a whole are not meeting the Australian dietary guidelines, the recommendations for the Australian dietary guidelines. And this is concerning because we know from the literature that if children are able to adopt healthy eating behaviors from a young age, this results in lowered risk of developing cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, some cancers, and obesity in later life. And you might be thinking, well, what's the big issue right now, like, within childhood years? And it's that if you look at children and the way that they eat, if they eat in a really healthy manner, it improves their concentration, their energy levels in class. If they're being fed, they're more likely to be more present and engaged with learning in the classroom environment. So it impacts all facets of life, really. But what's happening in terms of the international space when it comes to healthy eating amongst children? We do know that education structures offer social and physical opportunities to support children to have access to and learn about healthy eating. And this can help to prevent malnutrition in all its forms. And I know when we think of malnutrition, we typically think of undernutrition, but obesity is one type of malnutrition as well. And so there's a global focus on improving school food environments, and there's some wonderful reports that I want to talk you through. In 2014, the World Health Organization made 6 specific recommendations as part of their Commission on Ending Childhood Obesity. They recommended the implementation of comprehensive programs that promote healthy school environments. The United Nations established the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which calls for improved food security and nutrition at all ages, that is supported by global collaboration partnerships across local institutions and civil society. And you might be familiar with these particular sustainable development goals. Additionally to this, in support of the Sustainable Development Goals, UNICEF, in their nutrition strategy, advocates for policies and programs which help to foster positive nutrition practices among school children and for the implementation and monitoring of school food environments. A common theme that we see across these reports, which I'm going to show a quotation to you, and I think is well summarized in a statement from this particular report from UNICEF, is that every child has the right to nutrition. And today, the need for diets, services, and practices that protect, promote, and support good nutrition for all children has never been greater. So it is a topical concern for healthcare professionals, those in policy, teachers, home economics teachers all across the world. I want to take this back to the local setting. So thinking about Queensland. What is Queensland and Health and Wellbeing Queensland doing to tackle this particular problem? Health and Wellbeing Queensland has developed a whole school nutrition program called Pick of the Crop. The aim of this particular program is to increase opportunities for primary school students in Queensland to learn about and to eat more vegetables and fruit. I do sometimes use the word program, but it should be considered more so as a framework or an initiative because there actually are no predetermined activities. And I'm going to talk you through what this actually means. So it's not a program where there's strict things that each school has to do. So with this particular initiative, there are 5 key areas of focus here. And it's up to the school to develop a tailored action plan to address these 5 key areas of action. And it is up to the school how they would like to go about doing that. So the 5 key areas of action are developing connections with farmers and growers, embedding nutrition within the curriculum, providing opportunities to have vegetables and fruits at schools, to promote healthy school environments, and to also develop connections with family and community. Okay, so in terms of some important implementation characteristics, I talked about the school action plan, and this is developed by being supported by a regional coordinator. What is a regional coordinator? So a regional coordinator, they are employed by or supported by Health and Wellbeing Queensland. And they essentially support a number of pick-of-the-crop schools of a specific geographic region. In addition to the regional coordinator supporting the schools to develop an action plan, they also help with recruiting the schools, school engagement, community engagement, and also support in any shape or form. Each school also has to develop a school champion. So you might have heard this term before, but essentially a school champion is someone who really spearheads the program and takes ownership of the program for their school. So it's a local leader. The interesting thing about this initiative, about Pick of the Crop, is that the process of implementation is highly adaptable. And so schools may also choose to embed other complementary school-based food and nutrition programs to address one or a few of Pick of the Crop's 5 key areas of action. So you might have heard of Crunch and Sip or the Stephanie Alexander Kitchen Gardens. There are various wonderful programs out there, but there's also an opportunity to embed one or a couple of those into Pick of the Crop. In addition to this, Health and Wellbeing Queensland provides many teaching and learning resources, so professional development for staff, and there's also resources to show teachers how to practically embed food and nutrition within the curriculum without making it too burdensome, because teachers have a lot on their plate, as I'm sure most of you or all of you know. When there's an approved action plan, schools in their first year can receive up to $5,000 of funding from Health and Wellbeing Queensland, and schools in their second year of implementation have access to up to $2,000. Okay, so I've been talking a fair bit. And now I want to practically show you what pick of the crop looks like in action. And I hope that you can hear this audio, but please tell me if you cannot.
Crop is a whole school nutrition program that focuses on teaching kids more about vegetables and fruit across 5 different parts of the school. The idea is you want the whole school environment to support children to be eating more vegetables and fruit. So Pick of the Crop targets that through teaching and learning programs at school, connecting with local farmers, parent connections, making the whole school environment a healthy place to be.
Very, very excited, especially when they see the flowers and then the flowers start turning into the veggies. They love it. And so we've all been down and tasted the lettuce, and now we're just waiting for the tomatoes.
What I like about the garden is the mint, because it's like smells really good. And I like the tomatoes that grow.
I really like how it's seed to plate. So the children get involved in planting the seeds, watching the plants grow, and they get involved in the harvesting and, tasting the food.
The important thing with children is about being able to experience vegetables. They don't naturally go for them when they're young. So you need to give children positive learning experiences around vegetables. And schools are such a fantastic place to do that.
We have incorporated maths last term with measuring how far the plants have grown. We've also incorporated science with the senses. So they have got to smell and taste and feel the plants as well. Literacy, art, everything is just incorporated in with the garden.
Opportunities within the school context to give children those rich experiences about vegetables, trying them for the first time sometimes, understanding what their taste and their texture is like, seeing how they're grown in the school garden, and then linking that to learning about health. Pick of the Crop tries to encompass all of those aspects so kids have a really rich and fun time with vegetables, and then they're more likely to continue to eat vegetables as they get older.
Wonderful. I always love showing that video. I love seeing the children and how it exposes the children, gets them to think about all of their different senses when it comes to fruits and vegetables, smelling, touching, experiencing, and learning about where their food actually comes from. So that's just a little snippet of how Pick of the Crop is being implemented and actioned. So now, hopefully that you have a better understanding of what the program looks like, I'm going to talk you through what the evaluation process involved and what the learnings and findings from the research was. Okay. So a little bit about Pick of the Crop's implementation. It is being implemented only in Queensland state primary schools, and I'm going to be focusing on the pilot period of the program, which was from 2021, which included 1, the Bone and Burdekin region, 2, the Bundaberg and Wide Bay region, and 3, the Logan region. However, now the program has actually scaled up to include almost all of Queensland's educational regions. But for this particular evaluation, I'm just focusing on these 3 key areas. In terms of the pilot, these 3 key areas were chosen due to the participating schools largely coming from significant socioeducational disadvantage compared to other schools across Australia and Queensland. So all 3 regions experienced significant socioeducational disadvantage, but also the Bone and Burdekin and Bundaberg and Wide Bay regions were chosen due to their strong ties to the agricultural sector. And this was seen as an opportunity to really think about what resource mobilization can look like and how to really engage with the local community. So the aim of the evaluation was to evaluate the implementation and impact of the Pick of the Crop program, because at the end of the day, you might think a program is good, but if it's not creating impact, then what's the point of it? So we need to see, is it working? So this is where it gets a little bit technical, so please bear with me. In terms of the research, we use a mixed methods approach to look at the feasibility, acceptability, implementation, and early indicators of impact across the 2021-2022 period. The evaluation plan was co-developed between Health and Wellbeing Queensland and also the University of Queensland's Institute for Social Science Research. And together they developed what's called a program logic. You might have heard of a program logic before, but if you haven't, it essentially is a high-level framework that looks at the program's activities, the intended impacts and outcomes, and this helps to frame the evaluation process. A few key points that we wanted to explore was identifying the barriers and enablers to implementation, but also opportunities for improvement, and to see what the immediate outcomes from the pilot was. Okay, so we had 101 schools that were approached for participation in Pick of the Crop. 68 then enrolled in 2021 and 2022. So therefore, all of these schools were eligible to partake in the evaluation. And in terms of the evaluation, there were numerous components to it. It looks a little bit messy on the screen, but this consisted of interviews, surveys, and also looking at the school action plans. And the surveys also explored schools in their first year of implementation, also schools in the second year of implementation. And there were different methods that were conducted for the analysis of all of this data, which involved qualitative, so looking at the themes, people's feelings and perspectives of their experiences, but also some statistical analyses were conducted. Okay, so let's dive into the actual evaluation. We had 63 schools that ended up participating in the evaluation itself. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you will see that across the 5 key areas of action for the program, there were 307 activities that were delivered, which is a fantastic achievement. And this ranged from organizing excursions to local farms, green waste facilities. In terms of teaching and learning, there were integrated lessons into existing units. And there were also opportunities for professional development for the staff. In terms of providing opportunities for providing vegetables and fruit at school. This included implementing brain breaks, having cooking sessions, trying produce from the school gardens. You can see, like, people are getting very creative here. For healthy school environments, this involved improving the offerings of school talk shops, making sure that there's maybe enough bubblers around the school, and also developing wonderful fruit and vegetable gardens. And in some schools, they even developed what's called a bush tucker garden, where they have planted native plants from Australia, which the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities traditionally would rely on in their diets. And also in terms of parent connections, this was done through various forms, including social media, school newsletters, and also various signage that the schools would sometimes have. In terms of the interviews, there were a lot of rich insights that emerged from the discussions that were held with the school staff. And they're split into 2 categories. The first are the enabling factors for implementation, and then the second are some of the barriers and challenges that were also encountered, and we also do need to learn from. We need to learn from the successes, but also the challenges. So I'm going to go through each of the different themes now. So the first, which was the enabling factor, was having compatibility with school structures and demographic. It was found that for the delivery of pick of the crop components, they needed to be flexible, convenient, and compatible within school systems to accommodate the diverse school contexts, including student and staff demographics, and also local features, which were physical, such as infrastructure, any resources available, but also any values that the community or the school had. It was also more likely to be sustained if it was embedded in school culture, And I think from experience, we all know that for any initiative, if there is support from school staff and the principal, so the leadership team within a school, something is more likely to be sustained in the long term. A few quotations here from participants. One is, our school is in an area with a lower socioeconomic status, and it was too much of a demand on parents to provide the vegetable or fruit snacks every day. We then changed it so that the school provides the vegetable and fruit snack during munch and sip, and each classroom does their own version of munch and sip. And another quote, which I really like, is that understanding the landscapes of schools and the different players involved, from principals to parent and community associations, is important in understanding how to bring these different groups along on the journey. Okay. So the next theme was around establishing connections with community. This involved effective engagement with communication with students, staff, parents, PNC groups. This also involved networking the school to community actors such as growers associations or local farms, and having a wider support from the agricultural sector and also local government and councils. And one of the key roles that was identified of the regional coordinator was how important it is for them to help support schools in raising their capacity to establish connections and relationships with community actors. And here's a quote, another quote that I like. I really have found, and sorry, this is from a regional coordinator. I really have found that working with stakeholders, such as this Growers Association, has been helpful in building farmer connection around the region. Rapport building within the community, especially if you're not from the community like me. And it's even better if the regional coordinator was embedded and already living within the community of interest. The next is around establishing curriculum links. It was found that teachers need resources and support to know how to best integrate pick off the crop within the curriculum. So it's all well and good to say, yes, you need to embed more food and nutrition within the curriculum, but if there are no practical resources on how this can be done, then, you're less likely to implement it, right? It was also found by the teachers that establishing those curriculum links was more easily done through STEM-based subjects, especially the science and technology units. And this is a really nice example that I like from a school in Logan. We were doing a geography lesson and we were talking about the differences and commonalities between Australia and New Zealand, and I'd brought in a kiwi fruit to show the kids. 2 days later, one of the kids came up to me and was like, look, I have got one of those things that she had. It was amazing to see that she had gone and brought it in from home and made the effort to come up and tell me about it. So this just shows that there are many creative ways of embedding food and nutrition into the existing curriculum. The next enabling factor was around funding and resources. So schools really valued the funding that was provided from Health and Wellbeing Queensland. But if schools felt like they wanted to supplement what was provided, then it was really important to look at diverse opportunities for income generation. And this was really important, especially if some of the activities that they wanted to implement were more resource intensive or more costly to set up in the first hand, such as a garden with an irrigation system. So some of the school champions looked for alternative funding options, such as through local community grants, or some even became really creative and looked at selling vegetable and fruit boxes to the school community, or even recipe booklets for families. Other resources were also sought from local organizations and businesses which supported implementation. And so this is another reason why, again, building those connections with community is so important. This really helped with providing and sharing of resources. This included materials for vegetable and fruit gardens, such as saplings or seedlings, the provision of vegetables and fruit for healthy snack breaks, human resources to provide educational talks, and also running activities with students and to have students attend excursions. And it was a bit easier for this to happen when schools were so closely tied with the agricultural and farming sector. But it does require that initial effort to establish all of this. So moving on into some of the barriers and challenges of running the program. It was found that if a school is resistant to change or lacking support from staff or school leadership, this was a significant impeding factor. And also, if the local community had conflicting values. And this is actually more common than you would think. So for instance, in one of the interviews, it was shared that some of the members of the parent and community association, they thought it was fine for their children to not bring any fruits or vegetables, and that those ultra processed foods are actually fine to be heavily incorporated within the child's diet. And so there were some tensions, I guess, that were created amongst some of the communities, but also the school staff and teachers who were really trying to push this idea of improving student lunchboxes. So that's just one example of conflicting values. And this is an example from a school in the Bowen and Burdekin region. It was an important learning to see how entrenched the values and positive perceptions of unhealthy food options are. Another challenge was poor integration within existing structures. So it was viewed, if the program was viewed to be time or resource intensive, or that if it competed with school priorities and agendas, then this was a challenge. And also naturally, if there's any staffing shortages and turnover, and also therefore a lack of handover of what has been done and what needs to be done. And here's an example from a school in Logan. For 2 years, I've been trying to get brain breaks going, but it was seen as too much disruption to stop class for 5 minutes, so I don't have time for that. So these were the findings from the interviews that were conducted, but now I'm going to move into some of the findings from the quantitative analysis. This particular graph here shows the determinants of healthy eating, such as facilities that support vegetable and fruit consumption, before implementing pick of the crop versus currently implementing pick of the crop. And this is based on survey responses. And here we're just focusing on the responses that were excellent or good. So as you can see here, across all of these different survey items, there was a huge improvement to the determinants of healthy eating after implementing pick of the crop. So that's really promising. So it improved accessibility, but also students' knowledge, the vegetable and fruit offerings at the school tuck shop, opportunities to consume vegetable and fruit in the school garden, also attitudes to try new things, because naturally that can be a very daunting process for children. Here's another graph that shows, the yellow shows schools in their first year of implementation, and the blue bars show schools in their second year of implementation. What this is showing us is that not only are there positive impacts from implementing pick of the crop, but there are sustained and even greater impacts from implementing pick of the crop over a longer period of time. And this was across facilities that support vegetable and fruit consumption, access to the school garden, opportunities to consume vegetables and fruit, and also tuck shop offerings. Okay. So I'm almost done, but I did want to leave you with some exemplar quotes on how pick of the crop is creating impact, not just in terms of vegetable and fruit consumption, but also in terms of a shift in mentality and attitude. So this is one from one of the teachers. There is a change in attitude, more awareness and willingness to give things a try, whereas before it was, no, I'm not touching it. I think this is the most important change because I have years 1 and 2, so from ages 5 to 7. So I think that if we can start this attitude change with that sort of age group, then we have a better chance of success of getting kids to maintain that healthy eating pattern. And this is another quote from a teacher. And one of the kids in the year 5 class who has a difficult time engaging with school and would often turn up without a lunch, he was one of the ones who I saw really engage with the pick of the crop activities. And he came into school recently with cucumbers he had grown, and he had them for lunch. You could see he was really proud of himself. And with this kid, his experience of school can often be associated with negative attention. For example, poor grades or being sent home early for disruptive behavior. So to have something where he was receiving positive attention and something he could be proud of was a really important outcome. And this was actually something we did not expect from Pick Up the Crop. We did not expect for the children's confidence to be improved, that their capabilities would be improved, but also in terms of better managing their emotions. So some of the schools have even created what's called like a sensory garden. So kids, who have particular learning challenges or disabilities are able to access the sensory garden, and also which has helped them to re-engage back in the classroom environment. So this was something that was really unexpected, but a really positive outcome. Okay, so I think that's almost time. But I wanted to conclude with a few things. First of all, that we found that pick of the crop is feasible, it is acceptable, and it is impactful in improving the determinants to healthy eating for primary school children. It's a very positive outcome. However, it was found that the support of regional coordinators was absolutely essential in really helping with the capacity raising of the school champions and school staff and really creating a strong foundation for success. And also the local leadership from school champions was deemed crucial. Pick of the Crop offers a successful and flexible model to meet the diverse and unique needs of schools. Naturally, a school in Logan is going to be very different to a school in Bundaberg, to Bowen, and also all of the different educational regions of Queensland. So the realities of the schools are very different, but the flexibility allows for that tailoring and adaptability to happen. So program implementers should consider incorporating the capacity for flexibility within program structures, and should consider the vital role of local leadership to sustain its activities. And so I hope, the Pick Up the Crop example shows all of the creative in many ways, how the initiative can be beneficial to enhancing school culture and the dietary behaviors of children. Thank you very much for having me. That is everything I have to share with you today. And of course, if you have any questions, more than welcome to try and answer them. But if you have any questions about the research or the evaluation, I've left my email here up on the screen, in case you want to contact me. Thank you very much.
Leila, thank you so much. That was a really insightful presentation. I've just asked participants to type questions if they have them in the chat box, but I'll start with a question. It's great to see you had so many schools involved and continue to have so many schools involved. I guess, the resource barrier is a big one to overcome, and it's great to see that the funding's available and schools are supplementing that. I just wonder, is it a finite project? And in terms of trying to keep it sustainable, if that money wasn't available, how you see that working, or just insights into sort of how far along the project will go?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And this is actually the nature of the topic of my PhD, interestingly. So I'll start off with generally what's happening internationally and then move on to what's happening with Pick Up the Crop. So internationally, there's a huge problem with sustaining school-based food and nutrition initiatives. And actually, most school nutrition initiatives or programs are abandoned within 2 years, largely due to a lack of long-term secured funding or due to the volatilities experienced in the political space, or poor leadership. There are many reasons, but ultimately they stop after 2 years. So globally, this is a huge challenge and something that we're trying to tackle. When it comes to pick of the crop, I conducted a study that built on from this evaluation that looked at the enablers and barriers to the sustainability of pick of the crop, and I interviewed schools in their 3rd year of implementation. And so naturally, funding was identified as being absolutely crucial to help establish a lot of those resource-intensive components, such as a school garden. However, naturally, there isn't an infinite pool of money. And so the idea is that with the help of a regional coordinator, that this allows for empowerment and capacity building of not just school staff, but also the local community to allow for instance, resource sharing to happen. And for instance, schools in their 2nd or 3rd year, where they actually start to think about, okay, well, we know that, let's say, we're not going to have an infinite source of funding. How can we actually sustain this positive initiative? They were starting to get really creative. So for instance, some of the schools actually started to collaborate together. So some would give seedlings to one, another one would provide help share the cost of buses for excursions. But also there is this, we do know that ultimately programs need financial means. So financial means and physical means and resources. So this is where tapping into local community grants was really important. And also looking at internal income generation. And this is where we're still learning about, how we can really optimize the role of regional coordinator, so that the school champions can be empowered and feel confident enough to be able to incorporate these different creative aspects of funding into the program.
Thank you, Leila. And building, My mind's going off on a tangent. I could chat to you more about that. We'll get to Keith's question, his comment first. Thanks, Leila. A good summary of the initiative and some good takeaways. Do you have any insights, Ari, comparing impact in small schools versus larger schools, given POTC is a whole school initiative?
So in terms of the success in implementing pick of the crop in large versus small schools, is that the question? Oh, sorry, I think you were on mute.
I'm on mute. Keith, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I'm just thinking it's a whole school initiative. So in a small school, the reaches might be obvious, but in a larger school, we might see the whole school being affected or impacted, but not necessarily. I just wondered if your research had any insights on large schools.
Yeah, that's another really good question. I unfortunately cannot answer your question directly because I haven't done an analysis of comparing the size of the schools to the actual impact that was generated from the program. However, what I can comment on, regardless of the size, positive impact was observed. However, I would say that one of the challenges, though, in terms of small versus large schools, was in terms of the human resources. So for schools where there was maybe the principal themselves was the school champion and was also maybe had a teaching load, they felt that there was less time on their hands. And also in some of the schools, it was also observed if all the responsibility fell on one person, it was a lot more challenging, or they felt a lot more pressure on how to be able to sustain it in the long term. Whereas the schools where they had a coordinated team approach to implementing the activities, that they felt a lot more confident in being able to sustain the program in the long term. When I asked them, do you have any concerns with sustaining the program past 3 years? Like, no, we're fine. We have a fully operational team where the roles and the responsibilities are shared. However, yeah, when it was left to just one school champion, or just, yeah, one person, or let's say they had one person just working on the garden, then there were more concerns on how it would be sustained. And a lot of them did find this a shame, because they were observing positive impacts amongst the children in terms of their attitude and skill development. So it is something that we still need to investigate.
Leila, a comment from me. I like the multifaceted approach, that it's, yeah, a number of key areas. Can I just check with your evaluation? Was it 38 schools had done all, I think there was 5 or 6, they'd done all of those initiatives as part of it. Is that correct? And if it is, it's awesome. Like, they've done every one. Maybe I was understanding that incorrectly. Yeah, there. So 307 activities were delivered by 38 schools across all, oh, maybe not across all 5.
Yeah.
Were many schools doing all of them, is more maybe my question.
Oh, I think from what I can recall, schools were aiming to address most, if not all, of the 5 key areas of action. And I think this is something that the regional coordinators are there to support the schools in order to do that. But naturally, it is dependent on the existing resources and the capacity and capability of the school. So the regional coordinators meet the schools where they are currently at. So, one school might have greater capacity than another school that has less resources, and there's a lot of, let's say, staff turnover. So it's based on, yeah, the existing capability of the school. But typically, from what I've observed, is that most, if not all, of the key areas of action were addressed. And it's interesting because a lot of them do actually tie in well together. So for instance, if you have a vegetable and fruit garden, then there are more opportunities to consume vegetables and fruit in school. Then you also have opportunities to take your class, let's say your grade 1 class, into the garden to learn how to measure the pea sprout, for instance. So
Yeah.
a lot of them are actually do relate well to each other, and that was one of the challenges with categorizing the activities, because a lot of them did fall across, similar categories.
Yeah. Yes, okay, that makes sense. And yeah, changing that what's normal in terms of healthy eating. I noticed a few comments around that, and just surprising that 2 serves of veggies in your lunchbox, or even more, is probably a good thing. And yeah, the cucumbers, I like those little mini cucumbers. I'm seeing them a lot more now. And yeah, but yeah, just that what is normal, that culture around healthy eating. Yeah, it's great to see, and this is having an impact here.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the food culture of the schools do vary. For instance, in Logan, where you see a lot of cultural diversity, there's a lot more acceptance for exploring different cultural foods. So for instance, one of the schools developed, like, I can't remember what it's called, but I think it was like a food passport. And then so each week or each month, I can't remember the frequency, but they get to try food of a particular culture or cuisine, and they get a stamp on their food passport. So, there's a really rich, let's say, food culture there. But then sometimes in other schools, there might be a lot of resistance to, let's say, the Crunch and Sip program, and encouraging schools to have healthier lunch boxes. So there is variance in terms of the food culture. But yes, I do love those mini cucumbers. I love them. I love them myself. They're really practical and easy and cute.
They are, yes, they are. All right, Keith has made a comment to me. Thank you. The 5 components aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. Yes, they might be just doing some anyway. Definitely, yeah. Okay, I don't see any more questions come up. But Leila, I could definitely talk to you more for ages, but I won't do that. I won't. Yeah, I just, yeah, it's great and it's lovely to see what's happening up there. Okay, we might sign off. I hope you all have a lovely evening and thank you for attending our webinar. And Leila, all the best with the remainder of your studies.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, have a great night.